So we have a lot of diversity on the panel. I'm sure it'll be a very interesting discussion. And we'll try to leave time for all of you to ask your questions. So Bridget, would you like to start off?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Could we just start, Connie? And thank you very much, Connie. Always been a great ally in our work in municipal government. I'm Bridget Fleming. I'm a county legislator. I represent the 2nd Legislative District in Suffolk County, and that runs from East Mauritius to Montauk and includes Shelter Island. I was on the Southampton Town Board for 6 years and did quite a bit of work in trying to move the solid waste management of the town of Southampton forward in conformity with the DEC requirements and the new clean water New York State program. Could we just get a sense of who's in the room here today? So I have a sense of, I originally was told that I was talking about stormwater, so I'm just trying to readjust and find out what people would like to hear about today. So who here is from the solid waste industry? Okay, are there environmentalists in the room? Some is, oh, okay, great, welcome. And what about municipal folks? Nobody from municipalities? Okay. Municipality.
Yeah, we have one.
Yay, perfect timing. Well, is there anybody, could anybody who's interested in volunteering let me know what you sort of expected to hear from us today, you know, in terms of subject matter?
Sustainable waste systems, how to improve waste systems, if they do waste systems dealing with water quality issues and stuff like that. Maybe
I think this is solid waste.
But no, it's good. There are a few people here, so why don't we? I'm happy to talk about that a little bit.
Maybe you're right.
Yes.
Suffolk County has proposed legislation in terms of septic, and
Yes.
so that was sort of what I was thinking this would touch upon.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Happy to talk about that.
I'm a Richmond Riverhead. I'm also involved with the Riverside Rediscovered.
Oh, terrific.
And we've been all involved with you.
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't put it together. They let you over into Nassau. You have your passport with you.
My concern is the river and the workings to get the sewage treatment plant accomplished over there on the Riverside.
Got it.
And what
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything specific they were hoping to hear? Yes.
I was here for more for solid waste, for avoiding, trying to minimize our landfilling and air pollution, things like that.
Okay. So we have great panelists here. I don't want to dominate things, but I can just tell you, when I was on the town of Southampton town board as a council person, one of my primary goals was to try to get a handle on what was happening with our solid waste stream. In actually all of the towns that I represent on the Suffolk County Legislature, the primary way that waste gets off the island, really, out of those towns is by private haulers. And in a number of places, those private haulers are not even regulated. And we have a private hauler here who can talk more about that. But I can tell you, in the town of Southampton, 15% of the solid waste is self-hauled. So residents take it to a transfer station where they themselves separate it, and then the town brings it to Brookhaven's disposal systems, and probably ends up some in Coventa as well. We'll go through. When I got on the town board, we had no idea what the private haulers were doing. So it took a long, long time because it was a huge cultural shift. But we were able to pass legislation that requires that private haulers, which are handling 85% of the solid waste in that town, which is 140 square miles, about 60,000 full-time residents. So it's a good deal of solid waste. 85% of that is taken off by private haulers. So they are now, as of January 17, are going to be required to be permitted. So they have to register with the town, and in order to get their registration, they have to report what the components of the waste they hauled over the past 12 months is, and where it went. Part of that was spurred by New York State DEC, which requires, as you know, that what they call municipal entities, think that's the name they call it, report to DEC what the components of the solid waste that's being generated and then hauled out or disposed of, is. And we had no way of doing it. And for many years, the town of Southampton's response to the DEC requirement was simply, please don't ask us this, we don't know, because 85% of our garbage is hauled, solid waste, municipal solid waste, is hauled by private haulers. So we tried to tackle that when I was on the town board, and I think we're getting there, very slowly but surely. And so we hope that with that data provided to us by the folks who are taking most of our garbage out of town, that we'll be able to not only be responsive to the New York State requirements, but also sort of formulate policy going forward so that we can figure out how we can begin to build some of those incentives that Connie was talking about. For our self-haulers, we have the incentives in place. So Shelter Island has the yellow bag system, Southampton has the green bag system. What that is the bags are expensive, and you can put your MSW in the bags, but you can keep from those bags your glass, your plastics, and your mixed cardboard and mixed paper. And so it is less costly, and a lot of our seniors do it, and a lot of people who are very environmentally conscious, and actually a lot of our second home residents who come from New York City are more environmentally conscious than you would think on vacation, and they do some of that too because they've been sort of habituated in New York City to have to separate. So that's pretty exciting, and we're moving in that direction. But as I said, so far the only thing we have a handle on is only 15% of that garbage. Shelter Island, which is also in my district, has a remarkably effective self-haul program. They have a really visionary head of their transfer station who has managed to process most of the solid waste in a way that it's either recycled or repurposed, and pretty much is well handled. But you have to bear in mind the volume is tiny. It's a very, very small community. So for most of the larger communities, they really do prefer the private haulers, and so we're trying to work with the private haulers to figure that out. We would also like to, I know in the town of Southampton, I believe in East Hampton as well, officials are looking at Brookhaven's single stream plant. And we do have an IMA. I think they both have an IMA with Brookhaven because there are no open landfills in either of my two big towns. They've been capped. They still have to manage them according to DEC standards, but they're not receiving MSW. So that goes to Brookhaven. We have IMAs with Brookhaven, and I'd love to see those towns tap into the single stream. But so far, we've hit obstacles. One, the number just doesn't work yet. I know for at least Southampton, in terms of the dollars that Brookhaven wants to see in exchange. Another big issue for the private haulers is the private haulers under an IMA would have to be required to go to the Brookhaven single stream. And that's difficult because whereas everybody wants to get rid of their glass, cardboard, at least as far as I know, when I was on the town board, cardboard is valuable. And nobody wants to be forced to give their cardboard away as much as they'd like to give their glass away. And so there's a question of pricing to try to work with private haulers as well as the municipalities to figure out where's the sweet spot, what numbers work in order to allow them to tap into the single stream. I've toured it. It is a huge operation, and it's larger, I believe, than either of the smaller towns would be able to support. I'll talk just a little bit about Riverside and our clean water initiatives. So, County of Suffolk has recently made revisions to our county sanitary code for the first time since 1973. And that allows, it's a whole new section of the code that allows the county to be what's called a responsible management entity for the permitting and ongoing oversight of O&M for these advanced, what they call advanced and innovative nitrogen-reducing septic systems. We have 360,000 individual residential septic systems in the county of Suffolk. IBM did a study that estimates it will cost $8 billion to upgrade them all. And at the same time, we're seeing, especially in my district, we're seeing real degradation of our surface waters, our bays, creeks, and harbors, based on nitrogen pollution. And 69% of that is now being attributed to sanitary waste. So we've got a real job ahead of us, but the county is geared up with those regulations to begin permitting the installation of the systems. They're also really working hard on the R&D. They've recently permitted 2 advanced systems that will remove the nitrogen and meets the standard of producing water that has 19 milligrams to the liter of nitrogen. So we're trying to avoid our red tides, our fish kills. I don't know if you saw the recent one in the Hampton Bay, the bunker. I mean, that one, actually, the one in the Shinnecock Canal really is being attributed to natural causes. It's a good thing that we had a ton of bunker, and also a lot of either bluefish or bass that are the predatory fish that are pushing those bait fish into estuaries where there's just too many of them and they can't breathe. But we have had also recent ones, including in the Peconic River, which feeds into the Peconic Bay, that are attributed to low dissolved oxygen and high nitrogen, and they're saying that's coming from septic systems. So I'm really fortunate because the 5 East End towns recently passed in the recent election, passed a referendum that will allow the towns to use up to 20% of the Community Preservation Fund, which is a fund that was created in 1998. It's funded by a 2% transfer tax on real estate transactions over $250,000. It's a very, very healthy fund. And they can now use up to 20% of that on clean water initiatives. So while the county is doing this regulatory technology, movement to figure out how and what to get into the ground to start removing the nitrogen from our groundwater and surface water, the 5 Eastern towns, 3 of which are my district, are going to be able to fund some of it. So we're very excited. I'm fortunate to have really good folks working in these towns and in the county, and actually in a week and a half we're going to be meeting, the county is going to be meeting with the high officials from the East End towns to try to figure out how the county can work with the towns to implement the programs that they're going to use to create incentives and rebates to try to assist people in high priority areas to get the new technology into the ground. At the county level, we do have some funding sources, the Water Quality Fund that allows us to do a lot of great stuff on stormwater mitigation in particular, including the $250,000 that we just secured for Barbara for the Riverside Circle. So it's a big, big construction project in Riverside, which is the northwest part of Southampton near the courts. And although it was very carefully managed in terms of the construction itself, it didn't have the state-of-the-art stormwater management. And so we got additional monies from this water quality fund. What's going on out there? They're not interested in waste. So we were able to get the funding actually just last week, and I'm very grateful to my colleagues because that project is now a $4.25 million project. But what it's doing is it's using natural vegetation to filter out the storm water and then biofilters underneath. So it's holding on to the water, which is a new DEC requirement that you capture the water before it shears into a water body. And so then we're hoping that, the science is that the contaminants are filtered out before it gets into the Peconic River, which is where there was a really big, unfortunate fish kill, and into the Peconic Bay. So those are the things that we're working on. I don't know if that's helpful, but
Well, yeah, and we'll hold questions to the end until everybody speaks. And now we have Stanley Lomagino from Maggio.
Sure. Thank you for everyone that is here today. I appreciate you coming out. I guess I'll give you a little bit of history about how my family has gotten involved in or has been involved in the waste business here in New York market. And it started over 30 years ago. And for the purposes of this conversation, I'll just hone in on recycling and how we got into that, which is really near and dear to me. My father, who's now in his early 60s, was kind of the guy that really got this whole thing going, and just really off something really simple. My family, my dad and his siblings had owned a business in Brooklyn years ago, started over 30 years ago, and the whole idea of recycling actually came from, for them, was pulling wood out of the C&D waste that was coming in. And they were manually picking through this, so you get a pile of C&D on the floor, and literally they would use manpower to start pulling things out of it. And it started with wood because they were doing this overnight when the routes weren't running to create warmth. They were setting the wood on fire to give themselves some warmth, and it really sparked an idea in their head saying, well, if we can get the wood out, why don't we start with what else can we get out of this thing? And so where it started, like, hey, I just got to keep myself warm because it's about 20 degrees, and we all know what the winters can be like here, very windy, very cold. And on top of that, not only are they minimizing what's in the waste stream, but they're also saying to ourselves, what else can we avoid from sending to a landfill? And as you know, has been mentioned, Brookhaven, from what I understand, has about another lifespan of about 8 more years, give or take, is filling up pretty quickly. And one thing that we've been able to do over the last 30 years is pretty much more or less revolutionize the way of recycling. I'll kind of talk a little bit more about C&D. Single stream is something that's a hot topic as well here on Long Island. And we at Maggio Environmental worked really well with the Village of Port Jefferson. I wish Margot was here because we had met with her because, for example, Port Jeff up to about a year ago was dual recycling where they wasn't lumped in together. And I said to her, I said, Margot, what if we got into single stream recycling here? And she was all for it. We jumped on board with it, and because of that, their recycling ratios have been up about 20%. Because it's less work. It's just say, hey, let's just throw it all together and call it that. But getting back over to C&D, 30 years ago, it would take one guy probably an hour to pull out 4 yards of material. And as technology kicked in, it went up to 8. And now we can do about 20 yards per hour per guy. So, and the reason being is the state-of-the-art systems that we've invested in, thanks to Canadian technology and German technology, we have sorting systems that handle now both C&D and MSW. We have you can see it live in Yaphank. Anyone here afterwards, you're more than welcome to come up here and come down and see the facility and how it operates. But this machine that we have, this equipment now, can process anywhere between, say, 40 to 50 tons per hour. And we have on the C&D side about 10 to 15 people that will pick through this stuff manually. And along with that, we have trommels and all these different types of machines along this picking belt that help process this waste along. So by the time it gets down to the physical end of the laborers pulling it out, it's already been through a lot of phases already. So they're kind of just seeing whatever's left over. And like the big thing here on Long Island is the amount of wood that we see. So, and because of that, this system, it allows us to divert, on average, about 50% of our C&D waste away from a landfill. And this material that we see out of this has value. Like you had mentioned, Bridget, cardboard, for example. Cardboard has significant value. And that's one type of material we see out of it. We see metals, we see plastics. We also create the product that we ship to Brookhaven, which is ADCM, which is an alternative daily cover material. That is a product that we manufacture right there. So all of this collectively together helps, divert everything, as not everything, but 50% give or take, away from places like landfills. And on the MSW side, we have a pretty advanced system there where we're diverting probably about 30% away from landfills. And because landfills here on Long Island have a very short time span, just really the only one that is Brookhaven. As a result, we send our MSW out of state. We bail it and we ship it. And so our incentive is, not only diverting it away from a landfill, but we're able to pull out recyclables out of the MSW in addition to what the homeowner already did, or the business already did on their own. So, and because of that, it avoids, excess tipping fees, and the fact of the matter that environmentally, you're making a product that you now can sell to spot markets overseas. So, like cardboard, for example, it's, the market fluctuates month to month. We get this thing called the yellow sheet, and we price off of that to our customers on cardboard. But cardboard's a funny thing. People say, oh, I have cardboard, it's worth a lot of money, but if it's contaminated, it's a whole different story, So there is a value for that, but it wouldn't be as if it was totally clean cardboard, for example. And continuously what we do at Maggio is, we're a hauling company, so the idea is, the way I kind of look at it, it's the best analogy I can give, is our company in Yaphank is kind of like the beehive, and the trucks that we have are like the bees that go out and collect all the pollen. And we bring it back to Yaphank and we process it through our building. So, and it's a beautiful system that we have. Both MSW and C&D are processed in there, and it really, really helps put us up on the map of saying, like, we actually have physical proof that this is, you can see what it is. Like, you'll see a pile of garbage sitting there, and you can watch the whole thing go through the system and see what the residue is. And unfortunately, this stuff takes a lot of capital to get into it, to invest in the equipment, but your returns are pretty solid on that. And unfortunately, you can talk to other haulers and say, oh, I recycle and this and that, but they have a very, it's labor intensive and it's not nearly as efficient as the way we do it. So, and that's what we do, and that's what really excites us the most about this industry, is that we have a path for sustainability. And I think I might just pass it off to Patty, because I know you can get more into the statistic ends. And
Oh, I'm happy to, thanks,
Yeah.
Dan. And I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Patty Hamilton, and I when we had this conversation with Eric about doing this panel, I thought perhaps we could kind of get big picture and bring a little national look at it also. So I currently sit on the board of the recycling committee of the National Waste and Recycling Association. So I kind of have a big flavor of what's going on throughout the country, in addition to work with the National Construction and Demolition Recycling Association, which I used to sit on their board. So it's a big monster in every single state, and every state looks at it differently. I've had some real hands-on experience in the state of Florida as an example, where, believe it or not, they have a very lofty recycling goal that's mandated by statute. They have a goal of reaching 75% recycling by the year 2020, and they started that, that statute passed in 2010. So at the time they were at about 33% recycling. They're edging up over 42 right now, which is pretty remarkable. It's a different environment. I use that as a comparison to Long Island because there's a lot of land, there's a lot of landfills. There's certain parts of Florida where you can dump garbage for $7 a ton. And then you've got parts of Florida where it costs you $85 a ton. So you've got those variables. Here in Long Island, the limitations are so great. And I think one of the things that's so important and a good model, and we encourage it both in the private consulting I do with recycling companies, and I work with Maggio Environmental, I work with Mattatuck Environmental, Shelter Island. So those, I think what we're really focused on is, and need to, is it all starts with a generator. So a lot of great programs that we've worked on over the last 10 years have been speaking to the people, and I think one of the reasons that many of you are here is because of the vision of Long Island. What are you looking at and where are you going? And a lot of the onus in sustainability and recycling falls back on the generator. And that's not just the individuals. Before I got into the waste industry, working with them, I didn't know what happened to my garbage other than I put it at the end of my driveway on Mondays and Thursdays. But when you really start to look at it, you do realize that it takes all of us, not just in our homes, but in our businesses, in our communities. And there are some really beautiful models around the country where municipalities and governmental entities are working closely with private entities and with private groups to come up with programs to really focus in on recycling. The work that's being done at both Maggio and out at Matatock out on the North Fork, and this focus on construction and demolition, Stan referred to it, and I think Bridget did also, calling it C&D. And I always tell people when they say C&D or construction demolition, I say just imagine what it took to build the building we're in and what will come down if this building gets demoed or if you're building a building. So the waste and the material that comes out of that is actually the largest part of the waste stream across the United States. Depending on the state you're in, it accounts for between 28% and 40% of the total waste stream. So for businesses, and especially builders and developers, you know, if you are in one of those groups or associated with a builder or developer, companies like Maggio and Matatock should be your best friends, because they are taking that material and they are taking it down to the lowest common denominator and they're reclaiming it. And it is highly recyclable. It is non-soluble. It is not MSW or municipal solid waste. It is actually material that has a lot of value. And it can be valuable to the generator and to the processor. And those programs, you've got programs around the country. I look to the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County in Florida as an example. They have a waste energy facility like you do here on Long Island. They have a landfill, but they don't recycle construction and demolition material because the private industry has done that and they're doing it. So they just partner with them and they work together. And I think that is so critical for us to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. When you look at C&D recycling or any recycling, the thing that's so phenomenal about it is, number one, the environmental issue is huge, obviously, because you're saving space in landfills. But you're also, and you're doing the right thing, basically. I mean, if you really get down to it, it's what's the right thing to do. But recycling creates jobs, and it motivates and moves your economy. So all of us that are in businesses and we're in governmental agents and different entities, those are things that we really need to look at. So when you look across the country with C&D as an example, there's like and these are EPA numbers, in 1996, they estimated that there was 135 million tons of C&D that was being generated. In today's world, both building C&D, so construction demolition, plus now, if you think about it, a lot of the roads and bridges that were built in our country were built under the Roosevelt administration during the Depression. And those buildings, or those bridges and roads, need to be replaced. The concrete that is generated from that is mind-boggling, and the reuse of that concrete is nearly 99%. So in today's world, from 1996, which was what, 20 years ago, to today, it was 135 million. Today, it's 670 to 800 million tons of material being generated. So those are numbers that are like unbelievable. And when you really start looking at recycling from a standpoint of not just the good work that it creates and jobs, taking care of families and motivating our economy, the saving for our environment is huge. And I think for a group like Vision Long Island and the programs they're doing, they need to be really motivating the builders and developers and communities on Long Island to really focus in on this and think hard about it, because there are tremendous solutions. And I would echo Stan's invitation for you to come and see. He's not going to say this, but I can say it to you. Stan's dad, Anthony Lomangino, who brought that first sorting system to the United States in the late 70s into Brooklyn, grew that business. He sold it. He went to Florida and he built the largest private company for construction and demolition material in the country, and was the first inductee into the C&D Hall of Fame. So he knows what he's doing, and Stan and his brother and the team at Maggio are taking that, and they have a vision for Long Island. And it's something that the whole community needs to support. I encourage all of our elected officials and our public servants to look at those partnerships, because I think private entities are far more open to public-private partnerships than one might think. And there's a lot of really great things that can be done. And I'm excited about working with these teams up here in New York now, because there's a lot that this part of our state needs to be looking at as far as sustainability is concerned. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here and join in with all of you. So thank you.
All right, we got a whole lot of information here from different perspectives. So now it's your turn. If you have any questions, just raise your hand, and you can ask a particular member of the panel here, or just a general question. Yes.
Yes, can someone speak of the waste energy facility on Long Island, and what they're actually doing, and is there an expansion for Tappan Water?
I mean, as far as you're saying the burn plants and whatnot, like Covanta, I can't speak for them. I'm not, but I know that those, they run their business the way they run their business, and their whole thing is buying, with burning the MSW to create the energy. As far as what their long-term plan is, I'm not really sure. I really can't answer on that. And I know on our end, we are looking in that direction of getting involved in that type of handling of the waste. Our thing is just developing the technology that we already have and building on that, and trying to be as more efficient as we can to remove whatever we can out of the waste stream. But as far as the burn plants, I'm not sure. I don't know anything about it.
I can just say about Covanta, on the waste to energy, the one thing I can say from a public, from an elected standpoint, is that you're hearing more and more of it. And I think the reason why you're hearing more and more, how people want to, I was just talking about it last night, everything, any waste, folks on Long Island are looking to repurpose. And it's a commercial, it's a matter of meeting your budget and meeting your bottom line, but it's also, we're an island, and we have, especially where my district is, there's one east-west artery, so hauling things off the island has a tremendous cost in terms of dollars, but also environmental cost. So I think the waste to energy is a win-win that needs to be pursued. I can't speak specifically to it. I would like to mention also on Covanta, we haven't talked about pharmaceutical waste. A lot of localities now have these Take Back Your Medicines programs, which are critically important, because when those pharmaceuticals like steroids and antibiotics are getting into marine ecology, they're having tremendous environmental impacts, and we're seeing more and more and more. Our groundwater takes 30 years to get into the bays, creeks, and harbors, so we don't see necessarily what the impacts are going to be. But when we do, it's definitely interfering with the life cycle of marine life. So that goes to, that's what the programs, a lot of people are in the Operation Medicine Cabinet or Take Back Your Medicines or whatever. They're bringing back those pharmaceuticals. It's an amazing volume when you start collecting it. And what's happening with those is they're being incinerated too. But I don't know, maybe Patty, you can talk to waste to energy?
Well, I can't speak to it specifically on Long Island, but the technology recently in our industry, and again, I go back to Palm Beach County, they just built the most advanced waste to energy facility that's been built in the country in the last 20 years. And the technology is like phenomenal. So when you do speak to waste to energy, I do know that you have varying levels of technology based on when those facilities were built. But you definitely do see more waste to energy facilities being built. Interestingly enough, and you know, sometimes it does go back to politics and lobbying and special interests and all those words that we hate to hear, but the state of Florida is the only state in the country that counts waste to energy as recycling.
Really?
They actually count a certain percentage of every ton that is burned. It's not 100%, but they do count it. And there are some states, I really applaud you in that conversation about tracking the materials and where they go, which is, again, in some states, just a very standard thing.
Right.
And it just, I mean, and again, I would say a vast majority of the larger states and the larger populated states, California, Florida, Texas, I mean, it's just a given that when you're bringing materials into a processing facility, you're tracking it and you're giving reports, and they really have to do it because that's how they count the recycling. That's how they get a sense of how much recycling is being done.
Yeah, I think that stems from the fact that we're so rural. It's really eastern Suffolk. You know, in western Suffolk, most towns have municipal hauling.
Yeah.
I think all towns have municipal hauling. And that doesn't fly where we are. So it's a private industry, and the private industry is challenging to track.
Across the country, it is more like here than not. I mean, private haulers, and you don't have the municipal contracts, and I mean, yeah, that in some areas, again, a lot of it's controlled by who owns the landfills, but in many states there are no municipal contracts, and in some states that's all they have. So it's really kind of an interesting mix.
It's always a challenge to get it started because it's a taxing district.
Right.
And especially in the current political atmosphere, it's very hard, you know, people in the economic atmosphere, it's very hard to ask people, you know, to create a new taxing line. So that's one of the reasons why it hasn't gotten anywhere, you know, that idea of municipal hauling.
And part of the challenge you also mentioned about regulated haulers. I mean, when you don't have those guidelines, then you do have unregulated hauling, unregulated dumping. And so companies, I know the majority of the companies I work with, they want to be regulated.
That's
I mean,
certainly what I
they
found.
absolutely want the regulation.
Okay, another question? Yes.
So I'm a sustainability engineer for BA Systems. We have all of this in Greenlawn. And part of my responsibility for the company is finding different outlets for some of our waste. We have about a 50% recycling rate right now, company-wide. And one of the things I struggle with is food waste. I want to find an outlet for that, and I haven't been able to on Long Island or really any of the states that we operate in. Can you help me with more of that compost and some of the opportunities that we're coming for that?
Have you reached out to the National Composting Association?
I think I have in the past. It might be a year or two going back from now, but I think I have in the
I
past.
think also Town of Islip, Jim Heil, they have a
They do.
huge, tremendous composting facility.
Okay.
They do. They're taking yard waste and they're
Yeah,
windrowing
they are.
it. and-
I mean, after this, come on up and we'll talk and
Yeah.
get you in touch with Jim Heil, because that's his department in the Town of Islip. And I know it was just recently on News 12 where I saw that they were promoting it. And for us, like a company like us with Imagine Environmental, the economics aren't quite there yet for us to jump into that. I know like in like more of the 5 boroughs and, you know, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, they're starting to roll that out, if not already, they're rolling that out, where there's going to be a separate, basically bin, you know, at your curbside where you'll be able to throw material like that in there. I know out west, you know, California, it's a huge thing, but for us, the economics aren't quite there yet, because it's all, our business is really only successful on volume. You know, and where we are located on Long Island here, out towards the East End, the volumes, as you know, Bridget, on the East End, really tremendous. It's like a bell curve. I mean, it literally spikes in the summer and then it drops right off. So it's kind of like a tide, comes in, goes out. But Jim Heil is a great contact in Town of Issaquah. I know that it's right by MacArthur Airport. It's not far from MacArthur Airport.
You know,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say I commend you for that 50%.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Because, you know, one of the things that we have done very successfully is go into a business and do a waste audit and help people figure out how to recycle in their businesses. And you look at a state like California that also has a 75% recycling goal, and they have mandatory recycling, and they're still not reaching a 75% goal, so
But the composting is,
congratulations.
in the town of Brookhaven, we had a short-lived program where we were giving away compost bins to residences. I have a compost bin in my backyard, so, we separate all the food waste and compost bins. But that is a struggle as far as making that, the majority of the population do that.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity though, because it's definitely significant.
Yeah, it is.
in this
Yep.
review, so.
Yeah, I was
Well,
going to
you
ask.
can tell actually when you're in your own kitchen.
Right.
The amount of material that you're pulling out of the waste that you send to the MSW is pretty significant. We too have my 14-year-old's chore is to take the compost out every 2 days. It's really just making work for him so he stays on the straight and narrow, but that's another story. But anyway, also with large-scale composting, there are, we talk about costs. Part of the cost you have to think of on the commercial end is the regulatory cost, because environmentalists are beginning to discover some very serious groundwater impacts from the processing of organic vegetative waste. And most of our haulers who are processing what they're calling compost are doing it not from food waste, but from clippings, brush, and so and a lot of those folks are under very, very heavy scrutiny right now because of some discoveries that have been made in monitoring wells of some of the metals that are being released. It turns out it's not necessarily what's in the material, but the fact of these large-scale composting happening, for some reason, the chemical response for the groundwater is that the soil beneath the composting material is releasing metals into the groundwater, and we're seeing that throughout Long Island on the large composting. But it is definitely an obstacle we have to clear, because when we're thinking about the goal of reducing the amount of material that has to either go to a landfill or go off the island, I agree with you, it's remarkable how much, especially if you cook a lot of veggies, there's a lot.
If you get on a national level again and bring it down to the micro here, the waste to energy folks will be the ones at a higher level that will fight it, because they want the material in their waste to energy. Oh yeah. Yeah, they're normally butting right up with the composters because they want the material.
Why could I follow up on that? I just wanted to ask Stan with regard to the costs to private industry of hauling off the island. Because 2 years ago, I think it was the summer, 2 years ago, there was a huge backup at the railroad. It was
flatbeds.
It was the flatbeds. And folks were our transfer stations were literally holding on. Municipal entities could not move their waste, and it was causing significant problems because everyone's got aggregate requirements. So you can only
Have so much sitting there.
you can only have so much sitting there according to the DEC, and at the same time there was such a bottleneck. So it's a big deal.
It's interesting. So you guys, as you drive on the Long Island Expressway, you probably see it going west, but you guys see those big flatbeds with big green bales on them for the most part. That's all municipal solid waste. So that's for us, that's our residue. So after we ran it through our system, pick through whatever we get, whatever's left over, that gets baled, and we ship those out. We usually fit about, 18, 19 bales on a flatbed. It's usually about 25 tons on a whole load. But what and just so you guys get to understand, the transportation end of that is about $40 a ton. So give or take, some haulers are a little cheaper, so a little more expensive, but it's $40 a ton all in. Now those flatbed, the way those business models work is that they always need a backhaul. So what happened a couple summers ago was that, a lot of these flatbeds were delivering materials to Long Island, such as, to the Home Depots, the Lowe's, the Kmart's, for them to stock up in the spring, early summer, they're stocking up their stores to sell out all this material. And what was happening was, once you get through that initial hurdle, which is like late spring, early summer, to stock those stores, the stores like Lowe's and Home Depot say, we're good. We don't need any more. So what was happening was these flatbeds had no incentive to come here because they had nothing to bring, even though there was stuff to ship out. But a lot of it was just sitting in these facilities. And at that time, when that had happened, we did not own. I wasn't involved with Maggio yet. We had Matatuck Environmental. And we were bringing all of our waste while we built a transfer station out there and a processing facility out there as well. But in the midst, before having that, we were bringing all of our material to the town of Southold. And I remember speaking to Jim Bunchuck, and he says, look, I got to tell you, he goes, I can't accept, because we were running routes, commercial routes into Riverhead. And he says, that's town of Riverhead. I cannot accept any waste that you collect on your trucks from the town of Riverhead. Everything that you bring here has to come from the town of Southold. And a lot of people say, well, how can they find out if you're bringing it in from other towns? Well, it's very easy. They just open up one bag of garbage and look at the mail, and that's the end of that. And so that's how that, that's how it happens, But the idea, now we've seen we got over that hurdle. That was, a few summers ago. We didn't have that issue really last summer or the summer before that, but that was a big, big thing, that these flatbeds, the drivers, the truckers were not getting anything they didn't have anything to bring here.
I remember we had to seek permission to get it out on the railway.
Yeah, which is way more expensive, but you have to, the whole trick to the garbage business is just, you got to move it. You can't let it just sit. You got to move it through. And it's amazing, but that was a perfect storm that time, because that, along with no material having to come to Long Island, the other thing too, that a lot of these haulers, when they're bringing these bales of MSW out of here, they're usually either ending up, like for us, for example, they end up either in Virginia, Ohio, or Pennsylvania. Those are our major outlets that we use to send the bales to. And right around the beginning of June, every single year, Pennsylvania does a huge DOT push. So the haulers don't want to run at all through the state of Pennsylvania, because once they get stopped by DOT, they're tied up for hours.
Stand over in petrol for a minute.
Yep.
I want to see if
Yep.
anybody has burning questions out there. Yes?
One way of being more proactive about the amount of trash that gets out there, specifically businesses. Like if I go to Costco just switched from having their eggs on cartons to these plastic trays. Now I won't buy it there because it's like, these used plastic things that would take so much longer to decompose than the carton. So how do you incentivize a business to do that? Because you don't want to penalize them for penalizing. It's not incentivizing.
I know what we do, for example, is one thing that we do with some of our customers that have like dry waste, whether it's they could have a 35-yard compactor that they totally fill up with cardboard. One incentive for them is what we do is we give rebates. So we can rebate them some sort of dollar per ton. So that's an incentive to them, because it's a revenue, it could be a revenue stream to them, but also they're not being charged to handle that material, because I'm essentially getting the material and I'm going to process it. So that, like on our end, I would say that's probably an area of opportunity for haulers like myself and other haulers to work with businesses to say, hey, look, you guys have a significant amount of plastic. We can actually provide you some sort of piece of equipment that you can put all that type of material in.
I think also internally, believe it or not, it's sort of like, what's the story about the little boy who walks on the beach and it's covered with fish and he's throwing them in one at a time, and someone says, you're not, and it matters to that one fish. In your own businesses, the simplest things, like in our businesses, we'll ban styrofoam. We won't buy styrofoam coffee cups, and we just make people bring coffee cups, and we provide recycling containers. And if you're talking about internally, the simplest stuff, if you really, there's another old story out there about young people saying to their grandparents, you don't know about recycling. Well, I laugh because I remember when we ran out of lunch bags and I had to take my sandwich to school wrapped in an empty bread wrapper. I was mortified, but my mother reused everything, So I think it's a matter of reconditioning your culture and having a champion in your business. And that's what we see. We will go into businesses and find that champion and walk them through the process of how to do that. If that, I don't know if that answers your question. but-
Anybody, does somebody who hasn't asked a question, anybody would like to? Okay.
I'm just gonna say something about the businesses and their recycling. Sometimes a committee formed by the government, like an energy committee, recycling committee that works within the local villages and towns, can actually put their minds together and work to the awareness and education of the town, and then draw in the community, and that's how it works.
That's exactly right.
And they need the support from the top. So we have had a solid
Form a
waste.
committee to put an ad out there and say, this is what we're forming, this is what we're doing, and then those who are more consciously aware of the environment will join, and that's not, I think.
And I think it comes from the top too, because Town of Southampton has a solid waste advisory committee that has been more or less active, depending on what the interest level is of the various electeds. But I think Stan's point about the machinery is a really good, that sort of feeds into what Patty's saying about the public-private partnership, that seems like the way to go in terms of incentivizing. I mean, government can help in certain ways. We ban single-use plastic bags in the town. Is actually all of my, except Shelter Island, who now wants it by 80% according to the new Shelter Island Reporter. At the county, we couldn't do it. They're charging. They're going to be charging for paper and plastic instead, but it's incentivizing that. But that helps. Then the folks in the companies that want to reduce the waste they're producing have that much less to do, because and then it goes back to that idea of allowing people to sort of rehabituate themselves to a place where we used to crush every egg carton and
Right.
put it, we were more careful back in the day. And now if everybody knows that those green cubes that are traveling along are containing what we couldn't figure out how to repurpose, then it gives you, everyone has a sense that, I can do something either by composting or you reusing things that can really be helpful.
As we say over and over and over, you can have the most sophisticated systems and the processes and the legislation and all of that, but it starts with the mindset of the generator. The generator of the waste is the one who has to determine and make the choice. Do I put it here or do I put it here? Do I use this plastic cup or do I use a porcelain coffee cup? I mean, it's that simple, really.
Okay, I want to thank our panelists. This is an enormous amount of information, so I hope you all